In this audiobook, we are telling the complete true crime story of In Cold Blood, inspired by the real events documented by Truman Capote. What you are about to hear is not fiction. It is the story of real people, real choices, and real consequences. It is a story that begins quietly, almost peacefully, in a small farming town in Kansas, and slowly unfolds into one of the most disturbing crimes in American history. Holcomb, Kansas, was a place where life moved slowly and predictably. The town was surrounded by endless fields of wheat, broken only by farmhouses and dirt roads stretching toward the horizon. People knew one another by name. They trusted one another. Doors were often left unlocked, and fear was something that belonged to big cities, not to a place like Holcomb. In this town lived the Clutter family, a family that represented everything the community admired and respected. Herbert Clutter was a successful farmer, disciplined and methodical in everything he did. He believed deeply in hard work, honesty, and responsibility. He treated his employees fairly, paid them well, and expected the same integrity from himself that he demanded from others. His wife, Bonnie Clutter, was gentle and soft-spoken, though she struggled quietly with long periods of illness and depression. Despite her struggles, she was deeply devoted to her family and her home. The Clutters had 4 children, but at the time of the events in this story, only 2 still lived at home. Nancy Clutter was 16 years old and widely admired throughout the community. She was intelligent, kind, and dependable, the kind of person others naturally trusted. She helped neighbors, taught younger children, and dreamed of a future that included college and a career in fashion. Her brother, Kenyon, was 15, quieter and more reserved, with a love for building and working with his hands. He spent hours in the basement crafting projects, proud of the things he could make. There was nothing reckless or careless about the Clutter household. Their lives were structured, thoughtful, and rooted in routine. No one in Holcomb could have imagined that this family would soon become the center of a crime that would shock the entire nation. Far from Holcomb, 2 men were moving through life along a very different path. Dick Hickok and Perry Smith met while serving time in prison. Dick was confident, talkative, and manipulative, always searching for shortcuts and easy money. He believed he was smarter than others and deserved more than life had given him. Perry Smith, by contrast, was quiet and emotionally complex, shaped by a childhood filled with neglect, abuse, and instability. His parents were alcoholics, his home life was violent, and from a young age he learned that the world was unpredictable and often cruel. While in prison, Dick heard a rumor that would change everything. A fellow inmate claimed that Herbert Clutter kept a large amount of cash locked away in a safe inside his home. The rumor was wrong, but Dick believed it completely. To him, it sounded like an opportunity too perfect to ignore. After his release, Dick contacted Perry and laid out a plan. It would be simple, he said. 1 house, 1 family, no witnesses, and plenty of money. Perry hesitated at first, troubled by the idea, but he was drawn to Dick's confidence and the promise of escape from his own difficult life. Eventually, he agreed. They gathered supplies, including gloves, rope, tape, and a shotgun, and began the drive toward Holcomb. They told themselves it was just a robbery. They believed they would take the money and leave without harming anyone. But even before they arrived, the plan was already unraveling. On the night of November 14, 1959, the Clutter family followed their normal routine. Herbert locked the doors. Nancy finished her chores and prepared for the next day. Kenyon worked on a project in the basement. Bonnie rested upstairs. The house was calm, quiet, and ordinary, just like every other night. Late that evening, Dick parked the car near the Clutter home and turned off the engine. The headlights disappeared into the darkness. He and Perry put on gloves, checked the shotgun, and entered the house quietly. Herbert Clutter was confronted first. He remained calm and cooperative as Dick demanded the safe. Herbert explained that there was no safe, no large amount of cash, no hidden fortune. The truth destroyed the foundation of Dick's plan, but by then it was too late. One by one, the family members were restrained. Bonnie was tied on her bed. Nancy remained polite and composed, even in fear. Kenyon was brought up from the basement. What followed was quiet, controlled, and brutal. Each member of the Clutter family was killed. 4 lives were taken for almost nothing. Dick and Perry left the house with only a small amount of cash and a few insignificant items. They washed their hands, changed clothes, and drove away into the night, leaving behind a silence that would haunt Holcomb forever. The next morning, the crime was discovered. The town was thrown into shock and terror. Doors that had once been left unlocked were suddenly secured. Children stayed close to home. Trust disappeared overnight. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation was called in, and Agent Alvin Dewey took charge of the case. He interviewed friends, neighbors, and co-workers, searching for a motive that simply did not exist. The Clutters had no enemies. There was no explanation that made sense. Weeks passed with little progress. The lack of answers weighed heavily on Dewey, who became deeply invested in solving the case. Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Floyd Wells, an inmate who had once shared a cell with Dick Hickok, recognized the details of the crime. He remembered Dick talking about robbing Herbert Clutter. He reported what he knew, and investigators finally had a direction. Attention turned to Dick and Perry. Their movements matched the timeline. Witnesses placed them near the area. They had left Kansas shortly after the murders. The 2 men were tracked down and arrested in Las Vegas without resistance. Back in Kansas, interrogations began. Dick denied responsibility and attempted to shift blame. Perry struggled emotionally and eventually confessed. Both men were charged with 4 counts of murder. The trial that followed raised difficult moral questions. Psychiatrists evaluated Perry, acknowledging his traumatic past but confirming that he was legally sane. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury found both men guilty, and they were sentenced to death. Years passed as appeals delayed the executions. During this time, Dick remained defiant and unapologetic. Perry, however, reflected deeply on his actions. He read, wrote, and expressed remorse. In April 1965, both men were executed, bringing the legal process to an end, though the emotional impact of the crime lingered far longer. The Clutter murders were terrifying not because of passion or revenge, but because of their emptiness. There was no reason. No meaning. just consequences. In Cold Blood forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about identity, trauma, belief, and choice. It challenges the idea that living well guarantees safety and reminds us that violence can emerge from long chains of neglect and failure. Holcomb was forever changed by what happened that night. So were the lives connected to this story. Ultimately, this is not just a story about a crime. It is a story about becoming, about how habits and beliefs shape decisions over time, and how a single night can bring everything to a tragic conclusion. Some stories are not meant to comfort us. They are meant to warn us.